She organized books with military precision, helped children find their favorite stories, and never raised her voice above a whisper. But when someone noticed how she moved through the library like she was clearing hostile territory, they started asking questions about the Purple Heart hidden in her desk. Welcome to Beneath Word Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden service and quiet courage, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. These moments of recognition matter. The Riverside Public Library opened its doors every morning at 8 a.m. sharp, and Rachel Williams was always there 15 minutes early. Not because she had to be. As head librarian, she set her own schedule, but because those quiet 15 minutes before the world woke up were sacred to her. She'd unlock the heavy oak doors, disable the alarm system with practiced efficiency, and walk through each section of the library in the same pattern every day. Fiction, nonfiction, children's section, reference desk, computer terminals, emergency exits. Always the emergency exits. By 7:50, the coffee would be brewing in the small staff kitchen, and Rachel would be at the circulation desk, reviewing the day's schedule with the kind of attention to detail that made the Riverside Library the most efficiently run public facility in Millbrook County. "Morning, Miss Rachel," called Tommy Martinez, age 7, whose mother dropped him off every day before her shift at the hospital. Tommy was her first regular, a quiet kid who loved books about dinosaurs and always sat in the same spot by the big windows. "Good morning, Tommy. I set aside that book about velociraptors you wanted. It's right here." Rachel handed him a picture book, watching as his face lit up. This was why she'd taken the job 3 years ago. The peace, the predictability, the simple joy of connecting people with the stories they needed. What she didn't tell anyone, what nobody needed to know, was that she'd been looking for peace for a very long time. Rachel moved through the library with quiet efficiency, shelving returned books, straightening displays, preparing for the day's story time with the local preschool. To anyone watching, she was exactly what she appeared to be, a soft-spoken woman in her early 30s who loved books and children and keeping things organized. But there were small details that didn't quite fit the picture, the way she always knew exactly how many people were in the building at any given time, the way she positioned herself so she could see both the main entrance and the back exit, the way she'd pause sometimes when she heard loud noises from the street, her head tilting slightly, listening. And there was her walk. Most people didn't notice it, but Rachel moved through the library like she was navigating something more complex than book stacks. She cleared corners carefully, never approached blind spots without checking them first, and had an uncanny ability to spot trouble before it started. Like the morning she'd quietly diffused a situation between two teenagers arguing over computer time, or the afternoon she'd calmly managed an elderly patron having a medical emergency, while simultaneously coordinating with paramedics and keeping other visitors calm. But it was her precision that really set her apart. Every book in its exact place, every program running exactly on schedule, every detail managed with the kind of thoroughness that went beyond librarian training into something that looked almost tactical. Mrs. Henderson, who volunteered twice a week helping with the children's programs, had mentioned it once to her husband. "There's something different about Rachel," she'd said. "The way she handles crisis. Like she's done it before." Her husband had laughed. "Honey, she's a librarian. The biggest crisis she's probably handled is an overdue book." But Mrs. Henderson wasn't so sure. It was Dr. James Morrison who first noticed the way Rachel moved. Dr. Morrison was a veteran himself, Army medic, 2 tours in Afghanistan, now working as a physician's assistant at the county medical center. He'd started bringing his 6-year-old daughter Emma to the library every Saturday morning for story time, and something about the librarian had caught his attention. Not in a romantic way, though Rachel was certainly attractive, with her warm brown eyes and gentle smile. It was something else, something familiar. The way she scanned the room during story time, not just watching the children, but monitoring everything. Parents, exits, potential disruptions. The way she carried herself, shoulders back, weight balanced, ready. The way she'd appear at exactly the right moment when a situation needed managing, like she'd been tracking it from across the room. "Miss Rachel," Emma had asked one Saturday, "were you ever a soldier?" Rachel had paused in the middle of reading Where the Wild Things Are, just for a second, before smiling. "What makes you ask that, sweetie?" "You stand like my friend Marcus's mom. She was in the Army." "I'd just like to keep good posture," Rachel had replied, continuing with the story. But Dr. Morrison had been watching, and he'd seen the micro-expression that crossed Rachel's face, the brief moment when her guard dropped and something else showed through. Recognition, memory, and something that looked like pain. Over the following weeks, he found himself himself paying more attention. The way Rachel organized the children's programs had a structure to it that reminded him of military. The way she handled disruptions was textbook crowd control. And there was something about her hands, calloused in places that didn't make sense for someone who'd spent her career handling books. One Saturday, Emma was looking through the picture books while Dr. Morrison waited nearby, pretending to read a magazine but actually watching Rachel help an elderly patron navigate the computer catalog. That's when he saw it. Rachel reached across her desk to grab a pen, and her cardigan sleeve pulled up just enough to reveal the edge of something on her forearm. Not a tattoo, a scar. A specific kind of scar that Dr. Morrison recognized from his time treating combat injuries. Shrapnel pattern, multiple entry points, the kind of wound you got from an improvised explosive device. Dr. Morrison felt his pulse quicken. He'd seen enough combat injuries to know the difference between an accident and enemy action, and what he'd just glimpsed on Rachel Williams's arm was definitely enemy action. That afternoon, after Emma had checked out her books and they were walking to the car, she looked up at her father with serious 6-year-old eyes. "Daddy, Miss Rachel has O's on her arm like the ones you showed me in your medical books." Dr. Morrison stopped walking. "What O's, sweetheart?" "The ones from the war. I saw them when she reached for the stapler. They look like the pictures you showed me of the soldiers you helped." Dr. Morrison looked back at the library, where Rachel was visible through the large front windows, calmly helping the next patron, looking exactly like what she was supposed to be, a quiet, small-town librarian. But now he knew better. That evening, Dr. Morrison did something he'd never done before. He called his old Army buddy, Sergeant Major Rick Torres, who now worked in veteran services at the VA hospital in Portland. "Rick, I need you to help me with something. Hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to verify military service without being obvious about it, how would they go about it?" "That's a weird question, Jim. Why?" "I think I've met someone who served, but they're not talking about it. I want to understand why." Rick was quiet for a moment. "Female." "Yeah. Combat role?" "I think so." "Jim? If she's not talking about it, there might be a good reason. Some stories don't get told because they can't be told." Dr. Morrison understood what his friend meant. He'd seen enough veterans who carried classified experiences, traumatic memories, or simply the weight of service that couldn't be easily explained to civilians. But something about Rachel Williams made him want to understand. Maybe it was the way she connected with the children, the gentle patience that seemed to come from someone who'd seen the worst of the world and chosen to focus on the best. Maybe it was the way she'd created a sanctuary in that library, a place where everyone felt safe and welcome. Or maybe it was the recognition that came from one veteran spotting another, even when they were both trying to blend into civilian life. The following Tuesday, Dr. Morrison made a decision that would change everything. He arrived at the library during his lunch break, ostensibly to research some medical journals for a case he was working on. But really, he wanted to observe Rachel more carefully, to see if his instincts were correct. Rachel was at the reference desk, helping a college student find sources for a history paper on the Iraq War. Dr. Morrison positioned himself at a nearby table where he could listen without being obvious. "The problem with most of these sources," Rachel was saying, "is that they focus on policy and strategy. If you want to understand the human cost, you need to look at unit histories, medical reports, personal accounts from the people who were actually there." She pulled several books from the shelf with the kind of familiarity that suggested she'd researched this topic extensively. "This one," she said, handing the student a thick volume, "has first-hand accounts from Marines who served in Fallujah. Very detailed, very honest about what urban combat was like." Dr. Morrison looked up from his medical journal. The way Rachel had said, urban combat, not like someone who'd read about it, but like someone who'd experienced it. "Were you a history major?" the student asked. Rachel paused. "Something like that." After the student left, Dr. Morrison approached the reference desk. "Excuse me, I'm looking for information about combat medicine in Iraq and Afghanistan. Personal research for some veteran patients I'm treating." Rachel's demeanor shifted slightly. Not unfriendly, but more careful. "What kind of information specifically?" "Treatment of blast injuries, improvised explosive devices, that sort of thing. I'm trying to better understand what my patients experienced." For a moment, Rachel was very still. Then she walked to a section Dr. Morrison hadn't noticed before, a small collection of military medical texts tucked between the history and science sections. "These might help," she said, pulling 3 books that Dr. Morrison recognized as advanced trauma texts used by military medics and doctors. Very detailed information about blast injuries, emergency procedures under fire, psychological impact of treating combat casualties. She handed him the books, and as she did, their hands briefly touched. Dr. Morrison felt the calluses he'd suspected were there, not from handling books, but from handling weapons. "Thank you," he said. "You seem to know a lot about this subject." Rachel met his eyes for a moment, and Dr. Morrison saw something there, a depth of experience that had nothing to do with library science. "I believe in being thorough in my research," she said simply. That evening, Dr. Morrison opened one of the books Rachel had recommended and found a piece of paper tucked inside the front cover. Not a bookmark, a folded document that looked official. He almost didn't unfold it. Whatever this was, Rachel had left it there, intentionally or not, and reading it felt like a violation of privacy. But his curiosity won. It was a medical report, partially redacted, dated 3 years ago. The patient name was blocked out, but the injury description was clear. Multiple shrapnel wounds to left forearm and shoulder from IED explosion. Patient remained conscious and continued to provide medical aid to other casualties despite significant blood loss. Recommended for commendation. At the bottom, in small print, patient declined Purple Heart ceremony. Requested private presentation and no media coverage. Dr. Morrison stared at the document, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The scars on Rachel's arm, her knowledge of combat medicine, her precise tactical way of moving through the world. Rachel Williams wasn't just a librarian who happened to know about military history. She was a combat medic who'd been injured saving others, and who'd chosen to disappear into civilian life rather than be recognized for her service. The question was, why? Dr. Morrison returned to the library the next day, carrying the medical report in a sealed envelope. He found Rachel shelving books in the nonfiction section, moving with that same precise efficiency he had now learned to recognize as military training. "Rachel," he said quietly, "I think you left something in one of the books you recommended." He handed her the envelope. Rachel looked at it for a long moment before opening it, and when she saw the medical report, her face went completely blank, the kind of neutral expression that comes from military training. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice steady but different somehow, more controlled. "Tucked inside Combat Medicine, a field guide. I think you meant for someone to find it." Rachel was quiet for a moment, looking around the library at the patrons reading, studying, living their peaceful lives. "Did you read it?" "Yes." "Then you know." Dr. Morrison nodded. "Marine Corps medic, combat deployment, injured saving others." Rachel closed her eyes briefly. "Iraq, second tour. There was a school that insurgents had booby-trapped. When it exploded, there were children inside." She stopped, unable to continue. "You don't have to tell me," Dr. Morrison said gently. "I was Army medic, Afghanistan. I understand why some stories don't get told." For the first time since he'd met her, Rachel really looked at him, not the polite librarian smile, but the direct assessment of one veteran evaluating another. "How did you know?" she asked. "The way you move, the way you scan rooms, the scars on your arm, and the way you knew exactly which medical texts would be most useful for treating blast injuries." Rachel leaned against the bookshelf. "I thought I was being careful." "You were. It takes one to know one." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two veterans who'd found each other in an unexpected place. "Why the library?" Dr. Morrison asked finally. Rachel smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "After everything I'd seen, everything I'd done, I wanted to be somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. Somewhere I could help people in a way that didn't involve blood and trauma and life or death decisions. But you brought your training with you. You can't turn it off. The awareness, the readiness. I see threats everywhere, even when there aren't any. I position myself tactically in the children's section during story time. I have emergency plans for every possible scenario that could happen in this library." Dr. Morrison understood completely. The hypervigilance doesn't go away. But here, it's useful in different ways. I can spot a child who's being abused, a patron who's having a medical emergency, someone who might be dangerous. I can keep this place safe without anyone knowing they were ever in danger. And the Purple Heart? Rachel reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small jewelry box. Inside was the Purple Heart medal, polished but clearly never worn. They wanted to give it to me in a ceremony. Media coverage, photo opportunities, the whole thing. I said no. What I did that day, it wasn't heroic. It was just my job. Dr. Morrison looked at the medal, thinking about his own decorations that sat in a drawer at home, rarely looked at and never displayed. "How many lives did you save that day?" "Officially, 6 children and 2 adults. Unofficially." Rachel was quiet for a long moment. There were more children in that school than the official report said. Families who were there illegally, kids who weren't supposed to exist according to the government records. When the building exploded, I didn't ask for documentation. I just kept pulling people out until there was no one left to save. And that's why you don't talk about it. Some of those families, if their names had appeared in military reports, in media coverage, they would have been targets. Their only safety was in staying invisible. Dr. Morrison felt a deep respect for this woman who'd chosen anonymity to protect the people she'd saved. It took a special kind of courage to be a hero and then disappear, to save lives and ask for nothing in return. The children here, he said, looking around the library. They're lucky to have you watching over them. Rachel followed his gaze, watching Tommy Martinez read his dinosaur book, Emma Morrison drawing pictures of characters from her favorite stories, a dozen other children who came to the library every day for safety, knowledge, and quiet kindness. They don't know they need watching over, she said, and that's exactly how it should be. Word spreads slowly in small towns, but it spreads. Dr. Morrison didn't break Rachel's confidence. He understood the value of operational security, even in civilian life. But other veterans in the community began to notice small things. The way Rachel handled the annual Veterans Day display at the library with particular attention to detail. The way she connected immediately with military families who visited. The way she somehow always knew exactly which resources would be most helpful for veterans dealing with PTSD, disability claims, or reintegration challenges. It was Mrs. Henderson who first put the pieces together. She'd been volunteering at the library for 6 months when she noticed Rachel's reaction to a news report playing on the lobby television, footage from a military hospital treating wounded veterans. For just a moment, Rachel's professional composure slipped, and Mrs. Henderson saw something raw and familiar in her expression. Mrs. Henderson's own son had served in Iraq. She recognized the look of someone who'd been there, who'd seen things that couldn't be unseen. The next day, she brought Rachel a small gift, a bookmark with the Marine Corps emblem and a simple message, "Thank you for your service." Rachel stared at the bookmark for a long moment before looking up at Mrs. Henderson with tears in her eyes. "How did you know?" "A mother knows," Mrs. Henderson said simply. "My son David served with the Marines in Fallujah. He has the same look in his eyes sometimes." From that day forward, Mrs. Henderson became Rachel's unofficial protector, running interference when well-meaning patrons asked too many personal questions, and quietly spreading the word among the library's veteran community that Rachel was one of their own. The recognition came slowly, carefully, with the respect for privacy that military families understand. A nod from an elderly Korea veteran, a quiet Semper Fi from a young Marine who'd recently returned from deployment, small gestures that acknowledged Rachel's service without demanding explanations. But it was Tommy Martinez who provided the moment that changed everything. Tommy's uncle, Sergeant First Class Miguel Martinez, had returned from his 3rd deployment to Afghanistan with injuries that had ended his military career. He was struggling with depression, isolation, and the challenge of building a civilian identity after 12 years in the Army. Rachel had noticed Miguel during his visits to pick up Tommy, had seen the signs she'd learned to recognize in other veterans. She'd quietly started leaving books on post-traumatic stress and veteran resources where he would notice them, had recommended counseling services, and had simply been present in the way that only another veteran could be. One afternoon, Miguel was waiting for Tommy when he noticed Rachel helping an elderly patron who'd fallen near the computer terminals. She moved with swift efficiency, checking for injuries, keeping the woman calm, coordinating with paramedics, managing the situation with the kind of competence that comes from training and experience. After the ambulance left and the library returned to normal, Miguel approached the circulation desk. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I don't know what your story is, but I recognize a medic when I see one." Rachel looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "Marine Corps," she said simply. "Army, 12 years. Thank you for everything you've done for my family. Thank you for yours." It was a brief exchange, but Tommy overheard it. That evening, he asked his uncle about Rachel. "Uncle Miguel, Miss Rachel was a soldier like you." "Yeah, buddy, she was. Was she brave?" Miguel thought about the quiet strength he'd observed in Rachel, the way she'd helped him navigate his own struggles without ever making him feel weak or broken. "Very brave," he said. "The kind of brave that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone." The next day, Tommy arrived at the library with a drawing he'd made, a picture of Rachel in marine dress blues, surrounded by books and children with the words, "My hero, librarian," written in careful 7-year-old handwriting. Rachel hung the drawing behind her desk, where it became a symbol of something she'd never expected to find in civilian life, a community that honored her service while respecting her choice to serve quietly. 1 year later, the Riverside Public Library hosted its first annual Veterans Day tribute, not a public ceremony, but a quiet gathering for local veterans and their families. Rachel had organized it carefully, creating a space where service members could share stories if they wanted to, or simply sit in comfortable silence with people who understood. Dr. Morrison attended with Emma, who was now 8 and had become one of Rachel's most devoted storytime participants. Miguel Martinez came with Tommy, who still drew pictures of his hero Librarian and had started reading books about military history. Mrs. Henderson brought her son David, who was visiting from Portland where he worked as a counselor for other veterans. The gathering was small, maybe 20 people, but it represented something important, a community of service that transcended rank, branch, and era. Rachel didn't give a speech. She didn't tell her story or display her Purple Heart. She simply welcomed everyone, provided a space for connection, and made sure the coffee was strong and the cookies were homemade. But as the evening wound down, Dr. Morrison noticed something different about Rachel. The hypervigilance was still there. She still scanned the room, still positioned herself with clear sightlines to exits, but she seemed more at peace with it. She'd found a way to use her training to serve a different kind of mission. "Thank you for organizing this," he said as he helped her clean up. "Thank you for helping me remember that service doesn't end when you take off the uniform," Rachel replied. As the last visitors left, Rachel stood alone in the library, looking around at the books, the children's artwork on the walls, the quiet space she'd created for learning and growth and safety. She thought about the school in Iraq, about the children she'd pulled from the rubble, about the families whose names would never appear in official reports, but who were alive because she'd chosen to act rather than wait for orders. She thought about Tommy Martinez, reading his dinosaur books in the same spot every morning, safe and curious and full of possibility. About Emma Morrison, drawing pictures of brave princesses and kind dragons. About all the children who came to her library every day, trusting her to help them find the stories they needed. Different children, different context, but the same mission: protect those who can't protect themselves. Rachel Williams had traded her medical kit for library cards, her tactical gear for cardigans, her battlefield for a children's reading room. But she was still doing what Marines do. She was still serving. The methods had changed, but the oath remained the same: to protect and defend, to stand watch, to ensure that others could sleep safely while she kept guard. Some battles are fought with weapons, others are fought with books, kindness, and the quiet determination to make the world a safer place, one story at a time. Rachel turned off the lights, set the alarm, and locked the doors of the Riverside Public Library. Tomorrow she'd be back, 15 minutes early as always, ready to serve her community in the way she'd chosen. Because some warriors never stop fighting. They just find new battlefields. 2 years after the Veterans Day gathering, Rachel received a letter from the Department of Defense. The families she'd saved during the school bombing in Iraq had submitted a petition requesting official recognition for the Marine who had risked her life to save their children. The letter was an invitation to Washington, D.C. for a private ceremony at the Pentagon. No media, no publicity, just recognition from the families whose lives she'd changed. Rachel almost declined. She'd built her peace in the quiet corners of civilian life, and the thought of returning to the official world of military recognition filled her with anxiety. But then she thought about Tommy Martinez, who still drew pictures of heroes, about Emma Morrison, who was learning that courage comes in many forms, about all the children who visited her library and learned that strength doesn't always announce itself. She decided to go. The ceremony was small, held in a private room at the Pentagon. The families had flown in from around the world, some now American citizens, others still rebuilding their lives in new countries. Their children, now teenagers, remembered the Marine who had carried them to safety. As Rachel accepted a second Purple Heart, this one for the injuries the Pentagon doctors had determined were more severe than originally reported, she thought about the circular nature of service. She'd joined the Marines to protect freedom. She'd served in Iraq to protect innocent lives. She'd become a librarian to protect young minds and nurture growing spirits. Different uniforms, same mission. When she returned to Millbrook County, Rachel made one change to her library routine. She moved the Purple Hearts from her desk drawer to a small display case near the children's section, not for recognition, but as a reminder. A reminder that heroes come in all forms, that service takes many shapes, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought in the quietest places. The plaque beneath the medals read simply, "In honor of all who serve, on battlefields and in libraries, in hospitals and in schools, wherever courage is needed." And every morning, as Rachel Williams unlocked the doors of the Riverside Public Library, she carried with her the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged, standing watch over the next generation, armed with books instead of weapons, fighting for minds instead of territory, but still serving the same cause that had called her to be a Marine. Some missions never end, they just evolve.